The early germination of Mad God influences and inspirations started when I was very young. When I was about 5 years old, I saw King Kong on television, Willis O'Brien's tremendous animation work, and a few years later, Ray Harryhausen's The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. There was also, Life magazine did a spread on Rudolph Salinger's paintings at the Natural History Museum. But I think it was really The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad that started kicking things off for me. A few years later, I was introduced to Hieronymus Bosch by my dad, who was an abstract painter. And he had a number of art books. And again, Bosch was just one more element in the cycle of this gravity that was unconsciously kind of coming together. I had no idea where it was going, but I was just pursuing these interests. As a kid, I was influenced by Tex Avery and Max Fleischer, their work. I preferred their kind of misanthropic worldview as opposed to Disney's idyllic world. And then as a teenager, I was influenced by Bob Dylan, politically his protest songs, and then later when he took the change into more electronic music, his kind of surreal, meandering tales like Desolation Row were really tremendously influencing. I started Mad God about 30 years ago and shot about 6 minutes on 35 millimeter film, but the project just proved to be too huge for me to execute. When Jurassic Park hit, it was about the same time that we had kids. And so adjusting to the computer graphic revolution and having 2 children, there was absolutely no way that I could put work into Mad God, and therefore I archived it. And it sat there for 20 years. And those 20 years were probably the most important part to distilling Mad God into what it became, in that I had a lot of time to make sense out of things. And so I did a lot of studying and research, heading towards Mad God, getting more granularity and clarity in the ideas that I wanted to develop. And so other influences were, Milton and Dante, and had a lot of time to study art history, and which was really important. Actually, more so, most of my cinematic language I learned on the job. So I never went to school for film, but it was really important having an art history perspective, because a great deal of the kinds of things that I'm interested in, the weird and fantastic, go way back to the beginning of prehistory. The paintings in Lascaux and Chauvet, not only do they depict the animals that the people, the Cro-Magnons at that time, hunted, but they also depicted spectral beings and ghosts and imaginary creatures. And so I kind of pursued that line, got interested in Hindu mythology, in Balinese and Javanese shadow puppet theaters, and studied a great deal. Kenneth Gross wrote some books on the history of puppets and the interest in making small-scale effigies of characters that have their own personalities. And that ended up, puppetry has been around for thousands and thousands of years, and there was this kind of resurgence in the late 1800s, and it became very popular and was actually kind of a driving force in theater all the way up through the 1920s and the 30s, where puppetry was very much a part of the forward prow of the modern art movement at that time. And getting a cursory education in psychology, I got interested in the work of Carl Jung. And that again began to distill and clarify in my mind the importance of using the unconscious to develop ideas and to work through things. And I would write down all my dreams, study my dreams, and that gave me a different kind of a narrative sense in how to approach narrative. Not necessarily story with beginning, middle, and an end, but something that can encompass a great deal more, that's a lot more expansive. So Young was very important, and his Red Book came out. And his Red Book was really interesting. It was a secret document that Young wrote and drew for many years, like 30 or 40 years or something like that. Nobody knew anything about it. And then at some point, I guess his family members found it and published it. And it's really hard to get through. And it was a descent into hell for Young at the time. He, in working on this book for so many years, felt that he was starting to lose his grip on reality and went crazy. But he worked through it to the other side and back to sanity again. And sometimes the process can be just like that, I hope. Oh, and Jacques Tati. Oh, and Samuel Beckett. Oh, and Carl Zeman.